UK Cinema History, Becket, 1964, starring Richard Burton and Peter O'Toole. So, welcome to UK Cinema History, everyone. There are no rules here except respect, and we don't talk about what's going on in the Middle East. Those are. Other than that, whether you've seen the film or not, you're allowed to speak. Your opinion is valid. If you get too far off topic, we're just gonna drown you out. Just so you know. But hey, I go off topic too.
Or we get along with you. Maybe we get away with
yeah, that's true. The Pink Floyd The Wall and one we ended up talking about the worst concerts we'd ever been to, and that was a great episode. So you never know where this room's gonna go. All right, so we're gonna go around the room and talk about our reflections and whether we've seen one or both. I'm gonna start with Scylla, go to Vern, end with Yazzie, and then I'm gonna go through, as I usually do, what I call Pedant's Corner, where I nitpick all of the historical inaccuracies. Won't that be fun? So Scylla, you got a chance to watch Becket, and you'll be going now. Man for All Seasons will be new to you. So what were your reflections on Becket?
Well, I will start with a very new perspective to me, which occurred to me just about an hour ago at a certain point watching the end of the film. And that is that when we think of the period of Oscar Wilde, that is one of the periods where we clearly as a society decided to condemn homosexuality. Before that, we've had a lot of crossovers, I want to call that, instead of homosexuality. But it has never been addressed as in that period of Oscar Wilde where he was really condemned and you went to prison and you had to suffer for it. Now we have, in the last few decades, reached a very different point where we have redeemed homosexuality. And I think when we think today, our knowledge of homosexuality and crossing over or not crossing over, which is homosexuality means actually not crossing over, then when we listen to a film like this and the way Henry II uses the term love towards Becket, we have a context that is really damaged by the history we know in our system. That means we know that as Oscar Wilde, you will suffer for it, and we know today that everything, even though you might believe in a certain principle of religion, today you accept that they can even marry. But with this lens, I think it's not good to look at that film because it drives you into that direction. I think if we didn't have that lens of Oscar Wilde and same-sex marriage, we would be able to look at the film with a purer heart and purer love, and understand that this love that Henry has, I mean, there are incredible statements that he makes before and after the first half and the second half, of incredible statements that he makes about this intense admiration and love for Becket that, in my view, don't have anything to do with homosexuality, because love has no gender. And when we are homosexuals, it has nothing to do with loving another gender. It has to do with having intimacies with another gender or with the same gender. It has nothing to do with love. So when I watched this film, I keep thinking of the way I think in my society, and I want to separate that and try to give the benefit of this modern doubt to Henry for loving Becket with pure love, not with the love that I know in the realm of homosexuality. And that for me created a very, very interesting study in the film about what it means to be in a very intimate, I don't mean sexually, but just an intimate togetherness between the two. When he's a servant, when he pushes the other man aside and gives him that, it was not really a back rub, but it was something that where Henry says, nobody does it the way you do. There were constantly these very intimate, very close fruits of what their friendship was. Then, towards the end of the film, when he talks about um, Becket was the one who allowed him as a machine to to be to be more than a machine, without the instructions, without the the intelligence and the teachings of Becket, he would be just a stupid machine, whoring and a few other things. So there are so many ways in which he shows, or the film analyzes what does it mean to be in a friendship, in a lifelong friendship, in an intimate. I keep using intimate, but I don't mean intimate physically, but just we are, you know, if you
Codependent.
give, not even that. They're both independent, but they have an incredible, of course, because one of them is a servant, so that takes it a little bit off the chart, but nevertheless, he he is like one typical butler who is just a butler but knows everything. So he, as a servant, is given. It's a little bit like this show from Stephen Fry and Hugh Laurie, Weaves and whatever. I forget. I always forget that. Where the valet,
Jeeves and Wooster.
Weaves and Wooster. Yes, correct. The valet is Stephen Fry, and the valet knows everything. And the royal, the aristocrat is Hugh Laurie, and he's really
Bernie
stupid. He
Wooster.
knows nothing. He knows nothing. So, but in this case, it's the same situation. The king knows nothing, and his servant is extremely knowledgeable, to the point that he gets elevated constantly to higher positions where he doesn't belong. But then he finds a way, because his heart and his mind are so effective, that he's able, without experience, to become a bishop. And he does it, and he consults with God, and he tells John, in that situation, I didn't know it myself. I just discovered that in me by because I was given this position. That's how I have discovered my dedication to God. I didn't know it. I didn't know that I had it. So I think it's just a fantastic film. Uh, two 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 words to the music for the times is typical. For me, typical irrelevant, and I don't need it. In case before you
I
ask me
thought the
about,
soundtrack was garbage, even for the
yeah,
time.
yes, I
Actually,
mean
I thought the
it's
music
perfect.
was
It's
even for
perfect.
that time. It was
It's
horrifyingly bad.
actually perfect, but it's
Which is,
unnecessary. It doesn't
oh,
give
I thought it was
anything.
awful. No, I thought it
Yeah.
was awful. I thought the music was the worst element of the film myself. Well, we'll get back to discussing what you brought up, Scylla, but we're going to move to Vern and his reflections. Vern, have you had a chance to see both, or you just got the chance to see Becket, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah, I watched Beckett, which I've seen many times over the years. I probably haven't seen it in like 20 or 25 years, but I used to like it. And then I was thinking, well, now I think I understand why you paired it with A Man for All Seasons, which I think I've also seen, but less times and way back in the 80s, probably. But I was thinking another good pairing would have been Anne of a Thousand Faces, so that you could get with The Man for All Seasons, so that you could get both sides of that dynamic. But for this one, for Beckett,
Or Wolf Hall. I mean, yeah. I mean,
yeah,
there's a ton of pairings, but
yeah,
yeah, this was the one but
I got
this
it,
was
I
supposed to
got it.
be an
You
all.
don't have to,
This
I
was
got it.
supposed to be All Saints Day.
If let me do my thing. You want to step on all the comments? Let me do my thing, and then you can get all over it. So that was a digression. Anyway, so three things occurred to me when I watched it this time. So one, I have a very good friend of mine, one of my best friends of the past 5 years. We just played out like the Beckett Henry scenario, and so when I'm watching it with my wife and kids, my wife is like, "Oh my God, that is so Gregory in you." So there's that piece of it, where it's one of those things that kind of like what Sila is saying, like the love, it's very kind of transcendent. Love is a pure thing, it's a pure substance. But when you put it into a body, and when that body is in a certain uh, social context, it distorts, And so I think I definitely understand. I think I understood this movie like before, but certainly more now because, like our friendship ended. It didn't end with my death, but close to it. And so there's that element of it. But then there's also, in watching the film, I'm a big Star Trek fan. And so it's almost like the love affair between Spock and Kirk. Like there's that tension where one is logical and rational and the other is impulsive and kind of domineering. And like that dynamic, plays out where, we actually see like Henry just can't help himself, and he's all passion and emotion, and Beckett is very restrained, and he's even questioning whether he can even feel love or anything. He's just kind of a vassal of service and ambition. And so it's very interesting to watch, like as they both react to one another in this love, whatever. I guess it's a binary. They're like two binary stars that are just on the verge of collapsing into each other, and just burning each other up. And how that how they are, like you said,
Allow me to reintroduce
codependent
myself.
on one another. In the way that, like not independent codependent, but like psychologically codependent, and like kind of like a disorder. But I think also, the thing I felt like watching it, and actually, on the Spot Kirk thing, if you watch it, and this film was made like at peak Star Trek time, like at the beginning, '66. But they actually wear, like Henry actually wears Kirk yellow, and Beckett actually wears Spock blue. So I thought that was a very interesting thing. And then I would say the other thing, um, is, I guess it's a question. Like I think for me, like watching this film, like how homosexuality was viewed at that time. Because obviously Henry's the king. He's a vassal of God on earth, supposed to be the divine right of kings and all that stuff. And so was homosexuality in that time like still such a toxic stigma that he couldn't indulge at openly? And just to imagine like what that says about the institution of marriage, like at that time, like that he couldn't express that very erotic in the Greek sense love for this man that he obviously, it wasn't just a love of minds. Like he loved him mind, body, spirit, soul. He was willing to sacrifice other souls. And so, that's curious for the time that's supposed to be depicted, but also the time that the film was made. And then also just kind of what it says about, like homosexuality even now, as a reflection of how much we've grown. Because, of course, now, in America, I guess in the UK, gay marriage is now legal. So what does that say about human progress? So those are the three things. Like one, it resonated with me personally because me and a very good friend, we kind of went through this whole tumultuous thing like over the past few years, but also, what the film is depicting of this particular binary love, and then also just what it says about homosexually expressed love uh, throughout the ages. So those are my opening bids.
That's great, Vern. Okay, Yazzie, you put a lot of thought into this from what I've seen in the back channels. So
Yeah.
I'm just going to sit and take notes for a bit.
Cool. I really like both movies so much, especially like going back. I haven't watched Beckett before. That was my first going to this film, but Man for All Seasons, I have to confess, I didn't like it before, but this time I like, it was totally new to me. It was like I was watching it, I could say I was watching it for the first time, because it looked like a totally different movie. That was the movie that it was presented in my life all the time. It was there, like always there, uh, anywhere. So but mm, this time I sat there and I watched it and I saw new things. But like going back to Beckett, uh, this uh, first of all, I think in both movies we have to like acknowledge and appreciate the great actings. The performances are amazing, and the way Peter O'Toole decide to like present and play this Henry II, this kind of like flamboyant, like flaming, but not in a like stereotypical way, but the way like the guy who seeks excitements and adventure and new things. And also like I think what Sila was trying to say, like if there, it's not about only the sexuality but the companionship. Like he keep repeating all along the film that Beckett is the only smart person, he is the only intelligent being around here, he is the only friend I could like find. Yeah, all over the, like we keep hearing that. There is like, or like he even like a person who knows about his fear of blood, or like uh uh the person that he can trust. So that, like the companionship with the adventure, and also like some, and like they get so close and personal that the
Madam
chemistry,
President,
we totally see a
I
very
associate.
magical chemistry at the beginning, especially like
inaccuracies
uh,
more.
I told you, like uh, the way that they look at each other, or like the body language, the way that both movies you use this visual language that we're going like to talk about, the symbolism, the colors, as Vern said, or the set design, uh and the composition, the way that they put these actors, and I say again, how they look at each other without even exchanging the
What has
dialogue,
happened
but we can still feel all these emotions and going like, and that creates a very kind of like lover feelings. Even their fights, it kind of looks like a lover, like kind of corral, you know and you know like even when and he takes it so personally, the fights. Henry II, he said, like, he took it to the level that he wants his lover dead. And then when he wants him dead, he says no one else is allowed to want him dead, only me. I am the only one who's allowed to, like, talk behind his back and want him dead. Even his death, he wants him for himself. That, like, kind of goes to a very, especially because, like, like in the film, it's like kind of juxtaposed with the love of mother and other women. We can, like, take look at it very, like, in a very Freudian kind of, mm, you know audit, or like, yeah, like we can have that kind of viewing to that. And to see, like, because, like, all the women around, like, because, like, I'm gonna, like, talk about it later, but the way that both movies, it's very interesting that the approach to the relationship of kings and women around them, um uh the how the house, the how can I say, like, the let's say, like, in the Lion in Winter, that Peter O'Toole also played Henry II, he also talks about his children, that I found really interesting. I think that also could have been a very good pairing. But because to me, these two movies are kind of like sequels to each other. Because how, like, here he says, like, I never liked my uh children. I didn't want these children. And then also in and the way, like, he picks up this dialogue from this movie and continues that in Lion in Winter is very interesting. And yeah, I talk too much. I'm gonna stop here. And
All right. Well, before we open up the discussion on topics, I'm going to do my little pedant's corner. I don't have any notes for this. This is all just so I don't have. Well, before we open up the discussion on topics, I'm going to do my little pedant's corner. I don't have any notes for this. This is all just so I don't have sources. This is all just from years of being a history nerd and listening to podcasts. My favorite one was David Crowther does the history of England podcast. But let's start with Becket, which was based on a play by a 1959 play by Jean Anoulih. And Anoulih basically did the 1950s equivalent of reading the top portion of a Wikipedia page and writing a play about it. He had a book that he bought because he liked the color of the spine and thought it would go well with the color coordination of his bookshelf. And his wife said, "Hey, you should write a play about Becket and Henry II." And he grabbed that book, read about 30 pages of it, sat down and said, "Oh, I've got a great theme." So Becket, who's a Saxon, is rebelling against the Normans, but once he has power by taking it out on King Henry II, the evil Norman. Problems are, of course, Becket was not a Saxon. He was actually from a Norman family, although he was born in London. And King Henry II was not a Norman. He was an Angevin. His grandfather, Henry I, was the son of William the Conqueror, who Norman invasion had taken over England for Normandy, but it had passed by that time because Henry's had actually married the last surviving heir of the Saxon dynasty, and Henry's mother, Matilda, had actually fought for 30 years to attempt to get the throne because she was actually supposed to inherit it from Henry I, but it was usurped by her cousin. So Henry was actually the result of a Saxon and a Norman and a Angevin, which was his father Geoffrey, who overtook Normandy before Henry took over England at the age of 18. So the very basic premise of the play is complete and total historical nonsense, which doesn't matter as long as you love the film, which I do, because it is such a great comedy. But the central premise, yeah, it's a complete and total lie. Yazzie had talked about the treatment of women in these types of films, and here is where I do actually have a problem with Becket, because in terms of historical accuracy, his depictions of Henry's mother Matilda, I'm talking about no, because this is very, very faithful to the play, and Henry's wife are completely inaccurate. Matilda and Henry were extremely close, and like I said, she fought for 30 years to get him on the throne and drove the entire country of England into a period called the Anarchy, which was summed up as the time when God and all his angels wept because of the amount of misery that she inflicted on England in order to first try to get herself on the throne, and then to get Henry on the throne, which she did when he turned 18. Through actual negotiation. So she was an extraordinarily powerful figure, and it's never mentioned, but her full title was the Empress Matilda, because her first husband, before Geoffrey, was the actual Holy Roman Emperor. What is also not mentioned in the film is that Henry, at that point in time, in his relationship with the French king, Louis, controlled more of France than Louis did, but that he actually was nominally a liege to Louis for his French possessions. So Louis was actually his overlord, which is something either Anoulih just didn't bother to research or didn't fit into his narrative. But part of why he had control of so much of France was because of his marriage to Eleanor of Aquitaine, which the largest portion, which Burgundy, where all the great wine comes from, etc., came from that marriage to Eleanor of Aquitaine, who was an extraordinarily powerful figure in her own right. As Yazzie mentioned, if you watch the following film with Peter O'Toole and The Lion in Winter, with Peter O'Toole as Henry II and Katharine Hepburn as Eleanor of Aquitaine, you get a much better idea of who Eleanor was. And of course, she's written off as someone who almost trivial, is almost trivial. And instead of the incredible power broker that she was also the first wife of Louis, which is never mentioned. So part of the dispute between Louis and Henry throughout this film was that Henry had actually married Louis's wife, and they were married 4 days after the divorce became final, and did it without Louis's permission. So those parts I don't think are nitpicks, because they actually not make Anoulih's theme less valid, but it's still. But then the point of the film, I don't think, is Anoulih's themes. I think the point of the film is the camaraderie between Henry and Becket. I think this is one of the best bromance comedies that I've ever seen, and all the best scenes I think in this film are the ones between O'Toole and Richard Burton. And it's very interesting because at the time, people had thought that, gosh, they've kind of reversed the casting here, because O'Toole was known for playing Lawrence of Arabia, and he was known for playing Lord Jim, both kind of sullen, quiet characters who were capable of being quite loud, but they were, not parts that were that would be hammed up. Whereas, of course, Henry II was notorious for his huge outbursts. At one point, he famously got into a rage, started tearing a mattress apart and stuffing the straw in his mouth, which I can picture Peter O'Toole's version of Henry II doing. And so in that way, I think it's a great performance, but it is also so incredibly over the top and comic that it's the best part of the film. And they become, in a way, an Abbott and Costello routine almost, with uh, Richard Burton's Becket constantly playing the straight man. And this is a film I have seen probably 12 or 13 times. 4 times since the restored version. But back when I was watching it in the 80s and 90s, I was watching a very crappy, washed out color version with bad grain and poor sound recording. The version probably that Vern grew up with as well, and I would still watch it again and again because it was so incredibly entertaining. Now this restored version is absolutely gorgeous, and Vern might remember, but in the old version, just because the prints were so bad that they had on those VHS copies, I kept expecting Danny Kaye from the Court Jester to come out and start performing a song because the sets looked cheap. And then you watch this restored version and oh my God, it looks so beautiful. And it's like, is this the same movie? And it is. But anyway, now as far as A Man for All Seasons goes, there's an apology in front of the written play by Robert Bolt that he had used Thomas More as what he called an existential hero, and but he said he really didn't see any other way to make the story seem contemporary. But I think this also goes back to Becket, that both Bolt, who wrote the play A Man for All Seasons, and I know when he wrote Becket, were looking at them as contemporary counterculture existentialists up against the man, the authority, whatever the hip phrase was in the late 1950s when both of these were being written. But as far as the historical inaccuracies go, they're not as gross, I think, as Becket for A Man for All Seasons. First and foremost, the friendship that was supposed to have happened between Richard Rich and Thomas More is completely invented. They may have known each other briefly, but there was no mentoring or any of that. But that's necessary to bring its theme along.
Wait, Eric. I'm gonna stop you. Let's focus right now on right now that everyone has seen Becket. Let's just stay here because I want to ask a question. Okay,
that's excellent. That's an excellent idea.
The historical inaccuracy. I want to know what everyone saw. Okay, do you think when you go to these kind of epic historic movies, do you go to them for historical accuracy, or do you go to them for the character development or the drama aspect of it? I want to know what Vern wants to say, what Sia wants to say, and about the historic side, the Norman Saxon. I also like to bring it to the more contemporary kind of conversation. I saw a very kind of racial class dynamic there also. So let's see what everyone has to say about that. If Vern wants to go first, Sila wants to.
Yeah, we'll start with Vern.
Yeah, well, just so there were 2 starrings in when I watched it with my clan here. So one was the resemblance between me and my friend and Henry and Becket, but the other thing was the state that my wife is from in Germany is Lower Saxony. It's in Germans, but that's what it translates to. So I'm related to a couple of Saxons here. So there was a lot of stirring about that, and they're very rural. Like my wife's family they're like farm stock, so they very well have been peasants back in this time. But I think to answer the question, Whenever I watch these historic dramas, like I've lived through enough history, like being a New Yorker in this time, that whenever I read the papers, I'm like, that's not accurate. Like I work at a public college. It's always getting used to get battered in the newspapers all the time. So I never expect any kind of historical accuracy, even in current events. So whenever I watch this kind of thing, I have a lot of friends that are professors that are historians, and I can hear them kvetching about how stuff isn't accurate. But that kind of misses the point. Like if he just took the first paragraph from a Wikipedia article or from reading the novel or the historical text, he conjured this story. And, like I have a lot of problems with the way that he treats women, especially if he were historically accurate. It would have made a brilliant, like, love triangle or a love square, to make the women fuller. But, it's really like this bromance between Spock and Kirk. And Kirk is going to win every time. Spock always dies. Like that's how it is. So to me, it's about the character development and the way that the scenes play out and the way that they suppress other characters. They make them kind of foils so that it brings out like the dynamic between these two. And the script was brilliant, like the lines that they give Henry, and just the way, like it's kind of sad that the way that they, like, these two women, the one that died and the daughter who they bring to the castle, but that they use those juxtapositions of those two women characters and also his relationship with his mother and his wife to kind of elevate the love that these two men felt for each other in the way that they were incapable of reciprocating it. So if they had stuck to the historical facts, that story wouldn't be there, and then I wouldn't see myself and Gregory reflected in it. So for my sake, I like that he shrugged the history aside and just told the story he told.
I am your friend, and you are wrong not to love me. Okay, Scylla, what are your reflections on historical inaccuracy in film?
I take both sides. First of all, for example, if somebody in Puerto Rico says, I'm going to enter inside, which is a very common mistake they do in grammar, which when I say that in English, it's very obvious that that doesn't go. When you enter, it's inside, so you don't need this redundancy. But every single time I hear it, even though I know when they say it, I know automatically not only by the accent but by that construction that they're from Puerto Rico, it bothers me. If you have a perfect pitch, if you are have the talent or the gift of having a perfect pitch, is at the same time a curse, because every single time you go to a concert or you hear someone singing in the wrong pitch, is going to drive you crazy. You cannot hear away. So on one side, I think the artist has the freedom, because of the concept or because of the aesthetics, to manipulate what he wants, but the listener cannot hear away, cannot listen away. That, when you know those details, I when I see a film and I hear a person speaking Spanish, and I know that that's the wrong Spanish, it drives me insane. I cannot just say, well, okay, no, give him, just relax. No, I I I I cannot relax about things like that. But at the same time, I think some artists, not always, but some artists could explain with good reason why they did the change they did. Now, the group of people who just don't know what they're doing, that's another story. And I have the light impression that in this case, Janae from that angle, did not know what he was doing. I don't think that was intentionally manipulated, but I don't know. I cannot judge that.
Well, he told the story he wanted to tell, no matter, whatever facts he based it on.
Yes, but you're abusing of the listener. You're abusing of the people who know what the story is. You're taking you're slapping them in the face.
Can I say
Well, and
something
there's a
about?
laziness.
No, I don't think about it like that. Like, you can borrow historical figures to tell your story, to create drama, and use the familiarity bit of, like, the knowledge, like, people we have, like, what was that, like, Lincoln the Vampire Slayer, like, you can, like, use some
Still
historical.
more historically accurate. Actually, the Abraham Lincoln Vampire Slayer is still more historically accurate than Becket. But
But no, but look, because there are like techniques to, like, remind us. I think that actually it is very conscious about it. Like, the fork, for example. We see, like, props, the use of props, which is also in the Man for All Seasons. How, like, the use of object and props and costume, to help the narrative go on. Here, like, they use the technique of anachronistic. You put, because they cannot, like, they couldn't, like, uh create the multiverse, for example. So, like, or like Back to the Future, so they brought an object like fork and put it here to, like, ground us, like, to tell us, like, that this is happening consciously. We know
yeah, because
that.
forks weren't introduced into England until Anne of Bohemia brought them over in Richard
Yeah, like
II's reign.
200 years
That's correct.
later. And
Which is
especially about
also the hats that they wear are from Anne of
and
Bohemia's
yeah,
time. So yeah.
exactly, that's what I said, the costume. And the thing is, why they could manipulate this certain period of time, it's because it's the Middle Ages. There isn't actually a very uh accurate history there, like what we know, which I think has been played very, like, in the script of Man for All Season. It is very subtle, very beautiful, and when we get there, I want to talk about it. It's how history presented as the word of mouth, like the history that we have today right now. It is definitely, like, the narration of some people with their mind, and they put their ideas and their, like, biases in what we are having. That's exactly what Sila was saying at the beginning of the room. Like,
Well,
we
in a
see the
way, isn't Becket
relationship and the
himself an
dynamic.
anachronism in this? Yazzie, in a way, isn't Becket himself an anachronism in this?
Oh, definitely,
Because
definitely, because
he's talking about philosophies that are almost 800 years later.
800 years later, and
He can't have read
even
John Paul Sartre. He
Saxon,
can't have read
it was
Camus.
even Saxon. Beckett, that's, like, totally false. But I think what, and also in Lion in Winter, they played with this fact of, like, reality and like the accuracy and the drama. And I think how, like, you can, like, borrow a character and, like, put it there, and to, like, try to, like, uh tell another story, which I think here the most important thing is the dynamic between these two men. Like,
Well, I'm going to
how.
interrupt you because you just hit on
Go
something
ahead.
kind of brilliant, actually, Yazzie, as you do, quite often. Because the anachronisms in and the historical inaccuracies in Lion of Winter did not bother me nearly as much as the ones here in Becket, because they were either deliberate, kind of like what we were talking about when we were talking about the anachronisms in Caravaggio, or they were based on historical inaccuracies that were, while not true, For instance, Eleanor of Aquitaine never slept with Henry's father, etc., were rumored at the time, or within 50 years of the time, and were stories that were going around, and were pretending that they were true. But, and here's where you stumbled on something brilliant. I would watch Becket again tomorrow. I don't have any desire to rewatch The Lion in Winter. And I loved Becket, and The Lion in Winter, I could take it or leave it. Becket is simply just a better work as far as I'm concerned. So historical inaccuracies, yeah, do they bug me? Absolutely, they bug me. But I love the movie, and I love it, and I don't think that my version of the story, where the Saxons and the Normans had intermarried for nearly 100 years and become kind of a co-op that would have been nearly as good or fun or dynamic as the one that Anoulih put forth here. And the other thing is, you didn't think of all the things that you would lose from this film, because without that dynamic, without which is built on this historical inaccuracy, you do not have any reason for Peter O'Toole's performance. He would just simply be chewing up scenery, as opposed to creating this almost frightening yet comic, over-the-top character that makes perfect sense in the dynamic that the film presents between him and Becket, because he is basically lovelorn. And and this is how and I can relate. I wish I could say that no one else could, but I'm positive we've all had a relationship that where it just sends you over the top, and you do say things that you later regret. In the film, it's who will rid me of this troublesome priest. In real life, it was, let me pull it back up again. What miserable drones and traitors have I nurtured and promoted in my household, who let their lord be treated with some such shameful contempt by a low-born cleric? Which is very, 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 shall we say, mean of him, but isn't explicitly, hey, go kill this guy. And so, that is why he was able to get away with the punishment that he got away with. But that opening scene where he's at Becket's tomb, and he's like, "Oh, you got what you wanted. I'm going to be thrashed by these Saxon bastards." Completely inaccurate. Now, that story did happen. He was thrashed by monks, but those were Saxon monks in the film, and they were Normans who were appointed by Henry in real life, which means, and I hate to say this, I don't think any of them put their back into it.
I have an answer to that, which also plays to what Sila was saying. And one more thing about like what Vern said, and you said, and you, Eric, said about lazy when you diminish or you reduce the character of women to emphasize on this love between these two men, or the relationship. One thing I wanted to say.
Wait, let me interrupt real quick, and then you can make your point, Yazzie.
Look, Passion of Christ. Passion of Christ. Wait, no, not the Passion of Christ. The Supper. The Supper. The great, one of the greatest Renaissance masterpieces. Were there the table that Jesus and all the disciples sit on one side of it? No, there is no time accuracy to that. But we need that presentation to tell more different, more important thing, to tell a different story. And I think sometimes depend on what we're doing with our work of art. As the artist is totally allowed to go and does whatever he wants with this with history, because it's not his job to tell history, or he's
But this is
allowed to
where I
tell
wanted to. This
history.
is
Wait, look, if we want to say that this movie happened at the time that the entertainment wasn't as uh like 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 right now, there were no internet, nothing, 1964. If you wanted to have history, the accurate, like a real epic history, you could have go read a book. What this movie does that brings you back to rewatch is creating this juicy, kind of like gossipy and funny and witty, and the style and like the dialogues are brilliant, like the jokes, and even I think the use of Saxon and Norman's thing, like the way like it's used to like how Henry humiliates kind of Beckett, and how like this like to like keep the story moving, to like show later like this is the guy that I raised, this is the guy that I brought up, and look how he's like stabbing me on the back, which like kind of like said in the movie, like as you said right now, like he's gonna stab me. So I think it is used in a very smart, witty way, just the way that Peter O'Toole decided to play the character. Like I think I was telling like Vern, like to me his face looks like Joker. He's totally like a very modern Batman kind of character. The way that he wants to like scheme and like kill the guy that he created, this person, and now he wants to destroy it. This is like the psychology of him, and the whole experience is the that's so brilliant. How it is good in like for the woman point of view, uh the way that like he played with the Eleanor, uh, uh, Aquinting, Eleanor of Aquinting. That was very like smart. That like he wants something that Beckett wants so bad. He wants whatever he has, even though he's the king and Beckett is the servant. He's still, this feeling of the conqueror created around this man, that he wants to conquer everything, even though he's
Oh,
afraid
I
of
agree with you.
blood.
I thought that was a great, and that's why I didn't point it out as a historical inaccuracy. But what I was talking about when I said laziness is things like Eleanor saying that she'll go to her father and she'll go to her uncle. Well, Eleanor's father died when she was 15 years old, which is why she inherited Aquitaine in the first place, which is the only reason she married Henry. That isn't a historical inaccuracy for the sake of entertainment. That is just lazy writing.
It is. I
And
agree.
so there's where I differentiate. But like I said, I love the movie, despite all that, and I love the movie. I must love the movie a lot because these are the types of things that would normally just really, really bother me, and yet they don't. I've made an executive decision. We're going to do a Man for All Seasons next week because there's just too much to talk about. There's just too much to talk about with Beckett. And plus, that'll give Scylla and Vern a chance to catch it. It is, unfortunately, I think, unless you use one of the pirate channels, I think you're going to have to pay $3 to see it because it looks like they've pretty much sewn it up as far as streaming. I couldn't find anywhere that was streaming it for free, unless you have the HBO Cinemax package. Or Max. Max is the only one that's got it right now.
Yeah,
But if
you know
you
what?
don't,
It's not on. I was looking for it on Max, and it wasn't on mine.
oh well, it's $3 on YouTube.
Yeah. But one thing I did want to point out: the ultimate irony is the one Oscar that it won was for a screenplay.
Well, and it's a great screenplay. I don't care that it's completely
I'm just
historically
saying
inaccurate.
it's
It is
ironic,
great.
and I guess every historian's ears must have been bleeding at the fact that that's the one Oscar it won.
Oh my God, yeah. But
but
they look at all the Oscars Braveheart won and talk about his. Now that movie it bothers me because the movie's not good. You
but I
know,
have a question for Sila, the Christian imagery, like all those ceremony, because I think the movie drags when it gets to the ceremonies. They're beautiful, the music is beautiful, but how accurate they are, or how the symbolism, because I have no knowledge, like zero. And what I found in the books and like in all my like readings, it is the history of Christianity. It is nothing about these ceremonies. So I want to know like how accurate they are and what do they mean, like when it comes to this story.
Well, first of all, I was not there. Second of all, I grew up a Christian with a pastor who was a minister, but not Catholic, and nothing of that form of religion as it was handled in those days. So I really I understand nothing about when it comes to that. I have no opinion because I don't. I just saw it as an aesthetic aspect, which was used a lot on the outside. Inside, that did not exist, but outside they used a lot of very monumental aesthetics, and to me that was part of that. Like the at the beginning, and at some point later on, you see the particular angle in which they put the bell, the huge bell, in front of the camera, blocking the view, the monumental view of the celebration. So for me, that was just. But I cannot read anything into it in terms of accuracy and tradition. I don't understand anything of the realm of the Catholic life.
I will say that when I watched it, because I grew up in a very small, poor Methodist church that my grandfather was the pastor of, and I've been away from the church for a long time. Every once in a while, I will go to one of the gigantic cathedrals that we have. Like I live in the shadow of St. John the Divine, which is the only, I guess, cathedral in North America. And in this summer, when my family we went to Cologne, they have a giant cathedral that my wife really wanted to see, so we went all the way up. And when you go into these cathedrals or anything that's Catholic, and my first love was actually Catholic, both her parents very strict. In those gigantic cathedrals that they build, that they take hundreds of years to build, every little detail has deep, elaborate meaning. There is nothing that you can look on within these gigantic cathedrals that you couldn't get a 3-hour lecture from somebody. Like a tour guide could give you a 3-hour lecture on every candle and the meaning, every cubic inch or a square inch of the stained glass, every pillar, every altar, everything in these Catholic churches has meaning, and there's probably a song written about it in the hymns that they sing in Latin, not English. They could probably give you the history in Latin and in English and in Spanish and Italian.
Well, and
And
next week when we talk about A Man for All Seasons, that's going to be kind of an important point with the transition from Latin to English is a part of that.
yeah,
But Vern, I wanted a follow-up question to talking in terms of the sets and things like that, because you and I are both people who saw this before they restored it in 2004. And did you notice just how much better looking it was than that older print that we used to watch back in the day?
well,
That
that's the thing. I watched it on Freevee on Prime. So when in that opening shot, when he's walking up the stairs and he's got this cape on, like the color, like you could tell it's like there's like a sepia shift to the color because it's not black. There's no grays. It's all like sepia. But he looks like he's the color of a pumpkin. So I'm like, is that supposed to be crimson or is he actually orange? So in your the one that you watched, was it like a red cape or was it orange?
Yeah, it looked like a pumpkin. Yeah, no.
Okay.
But that I'm talking in terms of the not just the color saturation, but the sets, the fact that it was widescreen, whereas before I had been watching it pan and
Yeah.
scan. I never noticed how big the crowd scenes were and this film was made for only $3 million. As Hal Wallace produced this right after he made Lawrence of Arabia, which he'd spent a fortune on. And it is interesting that the one thing that it won for was the screenplay, because this is because I've never seen the play performed, but I've read it, and the play is just basically this film. It's scene for scene. The film just kind of opened up, But what I think it just does marvelously is the way it opens it up, And like I said, it's not something that I had noticed when I was watching it on the old television versions. But
Yeah.
my God, the sets and when they're riding through after he's retaken the French town, and the women are popping their heads out, and he turns to him to Becket on horseback and said, to note the address so that he can come back later, and then you get that overhead shot. You realize that's a real crowd scene. That's not a matte painting behind them. They actually hired that many extras, which nowadays would be done with CGI or what have you. And and that to me was like one of those they don't make them like that anymore type moments. And and Scylla, as someone who appreciates the finer things, what did you think about like the set direction and the art direction? I mean, and the setting, the sets and costumes for this. I mean, whether or not they were historically accurate is kind of irrelevant to this conversation because none of us were there. But did they put you in that? So did they feel accurate?
For me, it felt accurate. I thought it was. I felt many aspects were. Then again, I only saw it today or last night for the first time, so I don't know anything about those copies that you're talking about, the one that were not the original ones. But I find a very strong focus on aesthetics, which I don't think is always present, and I think many aspects like this perspective of the bell at least twice, that sways in front of the camera so that it blocks the scenery. I find that quite a vision experiment. I think it was a little bit beyond its time. I think they invested a lot in the aesthetics. I really liked it. I felt, to your question, I felt very much in that time. I found I was very impressed with the movie in every aspect, except for the time where I would want to be a historian and start picking up things. But
Yeah, obviously the same question to you.
Yep, the sets are like magical. Something that we talked about in Almodovar rooms is that that also happens here is that recurrent use like I said, like the props, like the knife, the amount of time that we see Becket is going to be stabbed by the knives, and when they're like in the shed later, like by that the young guy, his critic that becomes his lover, like no, like his fan later, and the young one, the young Saxon, and how like
Brother
the
John.
Brother John, the knife, and the sigil with the three lions, or the ring, and the jokes, like when Henry says, like, don't lose the ring, because if you lose it, then we have to go on war again. Like, it's
We'll have
funny.
to pack up and go back to Normandy.
Yeah. Exactly. So we have to pack up and go back to Norman. And I was like rolling because of old and the faces. The outfit of the middle age, like the in the church, like their outfits are hilarious. They're funny. They all look like, in the Bride of Frankenstein. Uh, Come on, help me here.
You're right. Also
Yeah,
Lanchester.
yeah, exactly. Igor. They all look like Igor there. So what? It's it's beautiful. It's poetic. All these, like, the scenes with the music, and I kind of like a lot this the gospel and the hymns, and of the kind of
When I
religious
said the music is
ceremony.
horrible, I wasn't referring to that part. Those
Yeah,
parts are
but
excellent. I
in
was talking
the
about the
ceremonies,
bum 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 bum.
but in ceremonies, they're like so kind of majestic. But then you get something like uh funny, and the jokes come, and the comedy relief. I think that's why it gets the Oscar for that, because of how the script is full of, like, layers and duality, and kind of like dichotomy uh, of Christianity and the reality of people back then. And again, to that point
It's like
also,
Abbott and Costello go medieval. This is how
totally,
is how I wrote what I wrote when I was watching the script.
it is.
They are
It
just
is.
a
Or
great
like Three
comedy
Stooges.
duo, like the greatest comedy duo. Now on stage, this was Laurence Olivier playing Henry, and Anthony Quinn playing Becket. And the film was actually directed by the stage director, the Broadway stage director, Peter Glenville. And what is really surprising, given how much we're talking about his focus on, Scylla used the exact right word, aesthetics, which is a word that actually comes up in the film itself, is he was not a film director. He has two credits as director, including this one. He did a film of Summer and Smoke, which is a William Eng play, and it was the exact same thing, where when Wallace bought the rights to the play, he bought the director and the set designer, and just said, okay, do what you did on stage, and put it onto film. But he didn't make this feel stagey. This does not feel to me, and we'll do another go around the room, but were there moments where it felt like a film stage play? I would say there were, when you get the isolated moments of Becket, of Richard Burton praying to God. That's where I was like, felt like, okay, this is a film stage play. But anytime that Becket and Henry are together, it did not feel that way to me. This felt very, very cinematic. My favorite scene, I think, is when they reunite after he comes back from France, in that field, on a horseback. Sorry,
On
it's
the beach.
on the beach. Yeah, which
That is
in
magnificent.
real life it was in a field. It was on a
But
beach in the movie. But
that dialogue is just the emotions is just humongous. I found that very good.
well,
But I wanted to mention one thing in terms of aesthetics. As you all know, I'm not a big experienced cinema person, but I don't recall ever seeing a film where a magnificent church is shown in all its grandeur without any pews, which elevates the architectural and the power of the building much higher when you don't have any pews. But I believe in all scenes you see the church always clean. There's nothing. The pews always interrupt the whole everything. And I found that very interesting how they decided, because I've never seen it
Well, it's a
before.
respect for the audience's intelligence, Philip, because another director, one who was maybe less familiar with the work, would have said, we have to put pews here so the audience knows this is a church. Whereas he is taking for granted that we know, and also that is historically accurate because pews didn't come in until the 15th
Correct.
century.
Correct.
Because everything was done behind a privacy screen, which is shown in the film. So that is some historical accuracy. Not for the time, but for the 13th century, which I guess, close enough.
Yeah, I found that beautiful to be able to. I'm not a religious person. I grew up one very much until I was 25, but I'm always, whenever I travel and I get a chance to enter, especially a Catholic church, I just love to take in that
Well, I was raised in
architecture.
the Anglican church, well, the Episcopalian church, as we call it over here, which, is kind of like Catholic light, where, we've got the paintings and we've got the crosses. We just don't have, we've got about 50% of the gilt. It's just like a diet version of Catholicism, which is what we'll be discussing next week, because of course the formation of the Anglican Church is the subject of our next movie, A Man for All Seasons. But I'm not a religious person at all either, but I am a lover of beauty, and if I get a chance to go to a Catholic church of any sort, or a cathedral of any sort, I take it because they are just absolutely gorgeous, and they sound gorgeous, and they look gorgeous, and
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
and it
and
has
smell
nothing to
wonderful.
do with, yes, exactly, they smell wonderful, yeah, and it has absolutely nothing to do with my belief about who created the universe at that moment, you know, or whether or not I am a Christian. You can love beauty whether you consider it to be man-made or God-inspired.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that I find probably fascinating about, and I guess that's why I'm glad you chose these two movies, because they do both depict men of extraordinary faith. And in this case, we see him go from someone who's basically an opportunist who finds his faith and principles. And those principles are kind of there, but they're not really tested or taxed. And then when he has to make these choices, and I think that's the fascinating thing for this time, especially as an American watching, like all these indictments of Trump and what's going on with the Republican Party, is like, this is a time. This is like one of those incendiary times. Like at that point, it's like we need money to go to war. Like that's what Henry wants. He wants money to go to war, and he's it's a desperate time for everyone. They break into that little hovel, and people aren't allowed to have like 3 sticks of wood without pain of getting hanged. And so when you live in these kind of dire times,
Oh, that's another one. Yeah, the forest laws and the enforcement of the forest laws in here. Oh my God, you're absolutely right. I had forgotten all about that. Yeah, and that
What
really
what
brings
what
it
uh,
home.
what was that?
The forest laws. What happened was when William the Conqueror took over England, he declared himself the owner of every inch of property. So that meant that you held whatever property you held from the king. And he set aside, and forest is the term they used, but it didn't matter. But about 35% of England was set aside as his forest, his domain. So if you lived there, you were under what was called the forest law. And he used it for hunting. It was an early version of conservation. He conserved this land as a hunting pasture for the king. So if you violated one branch without the king's permission in his domain, the forest, you would hang. If you shot a deer in the king's forest, you would hang. And this became a much bigger deal. It's one of the things that drove Henry's son John to his death was in Magna Carta is called the Major Charter, because there were two charters that came out. The second one was called the Forest Charter, where he had to rescind a lot of Henry's laws about this because he was so weak, and because they were the most hated laws in England, because people were having their eyes gouged out for accidentally stepping on a twig. I mean, that's how harsh things were. And so, and that goes to Verne's point.
So I'm a quick question just for historical significance. So I'm a big fan of the Disney Robin Hood, but also Errol Flynn's. So what period of time was that?
That was about 40 years later. That was, that was Henry's son, youngest son, John, and Henry,
I want to say something about the aesthetic and its relationship to the, not just like to the, like, beautiful to watch, also to the story and to the character of Becket. And like, even like in the very first of all, the church, this beautiful, clean, neat church that Seal was talking about. Like, see how, like, the irony of that place becomes like his death. That's where his, like, he gets killed there, like a murder in the cathedral. That I think that the irony there is also so beautiful. And Beckett's appreciation for beauty, like in the very last scene when he knows that he's going, like, he honored beauty in the climactic scene. Like, he knows that he's going to, like, face his doom and his death, and like, but he says, like, his, I'm trying to remember, like, his exact word. He says, like, God, adorned, like, God adorned the festivity, and like, do every lace. He talks about the lace. He said, like, God gives us time, like, to be prepared. When he's going to do the mass. He says, the assistant, like, he says, do up all the little laces. God will give us time. His
well, and that
moral.
brings up a great theme of the and that thematically, I think it really comes through. Just as Becket was a great servant for Henry, he became just as great a servant for God. That whatever job he had, he did extremely well. And that's all he was looking. This Becket, the Becket of the film, not the real life Becket. Just whoever your boss is, you do the best job possible, and you make them look as good as possible, and you defend them to the hilt, and that's a great theme of this, that he is just simply, he's been given a new job. The fact that the job has put him into conflict with his old boss doesn't bother him, or doesn't bother him much the way it bothers Henry, because he's simply doing the best job he can possibly do. He is the eminent clerk. He is the Radar O'Reilly of Henry's kingdom, to use a MASH metaphor.
Well, the thing is like, Henry has kind of assigned him that position and was his immediate supervisor in the church until, whoever the Claude who killed the person, or, whatever that plot contrivance was, until he did that. And then he stood on the side of right. So it wasn't even about choosing the side of the church. It's like there
Well,
are.
so at the end of the film, Vern, you chose Beckett's side in this? You thought that the film was saying that Becket was right and Henry was wrong?
I don't know about that. I think Becket was logically consistent. He was like Spock, like Spock forsakes himself for the folk. And
That's a
I
great
think,
metaphor.
Becket,
Yeah, and Kirk was off trying to fuck an alien.
there you go.
Oh
Just
my
and
goodness.
all of them.
This is hilarious.
All of them.
Oh my.
Touche, my friend, touche.
Oh.
But let's talk a bit about Beckett's character, because in 2006, and let me look because I did make a note of this, BBC History Magazine took a poll of the worst Britons of the previous millennium. And Becket came in second behind Jack the Ripper by 8 votes. In British history, he is considered... He is considered the worst Briton.
This is historically seen, of course. Not
Yes. Now, the way it was done was they would nominate one person from each century. So you had, but how Becket got nominated, I have absolutely no idea, because I mean, this was a time when the rack was invented, when entire towns were being cleared out by throwing plague victims' bodies at them, and Beckett's the worst villain. But it does go to something that is deep-seated after the Reformation in England, which one of the first things that Henry VIII, who we'll talk about next week, did when he took over the Church of England and destroyed the monasteries, was dig up Beckett's body, put it on trial for treason, and throw it into the river, and tear down his shrine at Canterbury. This is the shrine that Chaucer wrote the Canterbury Tales about, that had for hundreds and hundreds of years been the main pilgrimage destination in England, where people from all around the world, including Asia, including members of the Mongol horde, would go to Beckett's shrine, because he was so beloved in the church as a martyr, right? But because he was standing up for the rights of the church versus the rights of the state, he is now considered a villain in modern Britain's eyes, if you take this poll seriously, which I do not, but we're just pretending for this conversation that you do. But I'm wondering, in 1964, when this film came out, if they took that poll, would he still be 8 votes behind Jack the Ripper? Or is that something that our more modern, less, shall we say, religiously minded people, is this a perception we have, or is this something deep seated there? Okay, I guess that was a less interesting topic than I thought. It is an interesting fact, though.
No, there is something. I think the whole story with Becket happened because of lack of entertainment back then. Like, because Henry II, he wanted to, the way that he watches the trials, and he applauds. He applauds Becket. He says, "Yeah, go get him, Becket. Dude, you created this mess. You sent him to his doom, and now you're standing up there watching him like a true crime reality TV and cheering him." Yeah, good job. It's because he was bored. He wanted some entertainment, and the whole thing, that what you're saying right now, I think he would stood up, especially because of this kind of the homoeroticism subtext to the story first, and to today, and also a kind of commentary to the church and the religious and the corruption in the church, and then politicizing the church and religion, to the politics and all that. Also, the gays, and the fact that how how Henry II treated his monarchy, his job as an entertainment. He wants to have fun with his job more than, and the subjects, the way that he treats his subjects and all that. To him, everything is a joke, is like fun and adventure. And also to what Vern says about Robin Hood and how Becket becomes a character like Robin Hood when he starts like giving off the money to poor people. He practically like becomes Robin Hood, like
he says how easy it is for him
yeah,
to give those
and
things up, because
he
it's
said the
that
best
same love
money.
of beauty, that aestheticism, which is a word that he uses,
Exactly.
and Scylla just used, that forced him into that corrupt bargain to be the clerk to Henry. Now, the historian Dan Jones has a different theory. Becket was born in London. Let me get the exact information here. I did make a note of that as well. To Norman parents. So that's an interesting point. He did not speak a word of English, neither did Henry. They both only spoke French. So when Henry says, "I rule over a kingdom of mute," well, they can't understand you because you're speaking French and they speak Saxon. But it was the 21st of December, 1119. He was born in London on Milk Street in Cheapside, the exact same street where next week we'll be discussing Sir Thomas More was born. See why I had paired the two up before I realized what a long haul it would have been to trying to discuss both films. But and then his father's shop, he was a shopkeeper, went bankrupt while Becket was studying for the clergy, and he couldn't finish his schooling and was forced to become a clerk. And then, just as it says in the film, the Archbishop of Canterbury noticed how scholarly and learned that he was as a clerk, and introduced him to King Henry. And Dan Jones thinks that the reason why Becket has such an overreaction to protecting the church came from the fact that he was never able to finish school, and that he had what's the phrase for that? An insecurity about his lack of learning, given his position as the Archbishop of Canterbury, and felt like he had to prove himself because he didn't have the traditional education that the other bishops and priests and even deacons around him did, because he'd never finished school. And Dan Jones is a very eminent, and I wonder if maybe he struck on something there that both Anoulih in the play and Anoulih, who wrote this screenplay, had missed, but by using this kind of Saxon versus Norman dynamic that is missing. That what we're seeing play out is actually not a resentment of Beckett's resentment of the Norman class, but his own insecurity about his own class. And that is something I felt in the film and informed in Burton's performance.
Oh, that's very interesting. Because I was thinking, like while you were saying that, I was thinking, I like to the point that Vern was saying about like how we can relate the economy aspect of the story to today. And I was thinking how, and I said it at the beginning, that when an underclass raised up to become like one of the most powerful people, but he's not like the right race, he doesn't speak the language he's supposed to speak, he doesn't like look the way he's supposed to look. And so, because the other thing I know about the historic fact is that Henry II, yeah, he like falls down into this madness. We can say kind of like because of love, or like or his
Post
sense.
breakup burn is
Yeah,
the what the
exactly. Or
kids
maybe
call it.
that, like, yeah, post breakup burn, or because he started blaming people because he said, I didn't want him killed. I just wanted him to come back to me, to just let go of the love and honor for God, and comes back and serves me, becomes the servant and honorable person he was to me. It was my mistake to send him to become the archbishop. Kind of like Michael Cohen, like the Trump said, like, I want him back to do all these skills stuff to me, not for like the FBI and the government, So I was thinking maybe that's the problem.
That's a brilliant observation, actually, and somebody needs to make that movie, a modern day version of the Becket story with Cohen and Trump replacing them. That'd be a great movie. Which I think Vern was kind of hinting at that as well. So that's a joint kudos, because that's a brilliant observation between the two of you.
I really, really, really would love, or would have loved, to see Peter O'Toole playing number 45.
Oh my God, yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah. Although he didn't have a very good American accent, I'm not an actor. I'm a movie star. My favorite year. It's a great movie. Great movie. God. Again, we're not doing the history of American film. No, we're doing UK cinema history. So I guess I'll. Yeah. But
what's number 5? Number 45?
That would be.
I never speak of his name.
The Donald. The previous guy.
Oh, the president, number 45.
I never speak of his name.
Me and presidents.
The Cheeto stain.
Yeah.
But now there's an interesting thing, though, because that goes back to my 2006 poll of Becket as being one of the worst people in history. If they took that poll today, I wonder if Becket would be considered more highly, because what has cropped up since 2006 is you have a lot more fascination, especially with these streaming shows, with that particular period of history. So we know where Normandy came from now, because we had the Vikings show that showed Olo founding Normandy and all of that, and we've seen the Becket story told several different times in several different ways, and we have a lot more broad perspective than they did it in 2006. I wonder if they took that poll today, if they might have it. And now, I don't come out of this feeling Becket was right and Henry was wrong. I felt more like Anoulih had created in Becket an existential hero who is right because he is standing up for what he himself believes, not for what the church believes. That is to say, in the film, nothing to do with real life, but in the film, what you see is he is right simply because he is standing up for what he believes, and that's a very existential, very counterculture. That's very Camus, very Sartre. We're going to talk next week about how Thomas More becomes kind of a Kierkegaardian absurdism figure in that play. But I didn't actually come out of that saying that somehow or another Becket was standing up for something that was right or wrong, because you don't actually get the details of it. Why should the clergy, which was over 50% of England at that point, was considered part of the clergy, because the law was passed down to basically anyone who could read and write was considered part of the clergy. And and because the clergy was such a large percentage of the population, not be under the same laws as the rest. And it's never answered in the film, and it's never asked. We are never asked to actually side with Becket on this issue. And of course, it wasn't the issue at hand anyway. The Council of Clarendon had several other things, and it's hinted at briefly when Becket signs off on 9 of the 10 articles, but only will stand on the idea of the clergy not being tried in the King's Court. But Henry was a person who created English common law as we know it. And so he would have, of course, found it very personally offensive that anyone was outside the jurisdiction of his law. And going back to what I was when I was talking about the Forest Law, under the laws of his great-grandfather, William the Conqueror, those people were holding anything that they held from the king anyway. So, not is Becket a villain, obviously, but is this film even really taking a side on that? Because I don't actually think it is. I never hear anything trying to convince me that, this is the way it's always been done, so it should always be done this way, which was the only real thing that they had, because you have to think of the Middle Ages. They did not, innovation was the worst possible thing you could do. And they never looked at anything in the future as being brighter than the past. The past was always where things were better, because they looked back to things before the collapse of Rome. And so, the only possible reason for keeping things for the way what Becket is fighting for in the film would be that because we've always done it that way. What do you all think? Is there a scene that I'm missing that at least not maybe convinced you, but was where the film was trying to convince you that Becket was right and Henry was wrong?
I don't know if the film is directing me towards that. If it is, I'm not seeing it. All I'm seeing is my reaction to the dynamics of both of them, why they do what they do, and above everything, how intensively Henry needs Becket, and how irrelevant is actually in the mind of Becket to need Henry. So I simply, for me, the only prevalent thing is the king has some disturbance from his childhood, or I don't know where else from, or perhaps from the fact that he is actually a through and through homosexual and cannot live it out, and that frustrates him. But Becket has always been the sound mind, the educated person, the one that sees with a very unique objectivity, at least in my view, how to handle his new situation, even if it comes as a surprise. He always knows which way to go, and that is a very objective decision that he makes. So for me, it's very clear, especially throughout the tragic ending, that Becket is right. But I don't know if the film is asking me to make a decision. I never saw that. The thing that
No, that's an excellent point. It asks you to side with Becket without actually asking you to take his side.
I don't think it does. I think it shows me but that is that's why I say it's not the film, it's me. I am the one who is constantly from the beginning seeing with absolute clarity Becket is the man. He knows how to make decisions. He knows how to give you a massage. He knows how to respect you and honor you without touching your organs, without getting too close. He knows how to give you everything without talking about love. He is the man. The only question that I have is, why is it that Henry is so fixated on saving Gilbert? That for me is the question.
Well, I think that's actually explained pretty well, which is that Henry believes that if you take down one of his noblemen, he's next. And and when he's talking to Becket, when they take that town in France, when they have the prostitute, the French prostitute, in the bed with him, and Becket says to him that if he does not stop the church, there'll be 2 kings of England
Yes,
within a
yes.
year, and in 10 years there'll be 1 king of England and not him. And so I that's your explanation, that if he allows Gilbert as a symbolic gesture to go down, then
Okay, okay.
then his whole entire kingdom no longer rests on his role as basically as the great grandson of the conqueror, the arbiter of all law in England, because he's
Yeah, and
given. Go ahead, go ahead, Vern.
finish your sentence, and then I was going to go on a tear.
Okay. I
Okay, so you lost
yeah,
it.
yeah. I think it's explained very well, but it's not spoon fed to you, which makes it interesting. I might have missed a scene, even though I've seen this film like 12 times. But I might have missed something where the film shows its hand as to, whether or not you're supposed to agree with Becket on the particular issue at hand, because the film doesn't spoon feed you answers. Okay, go ahead, Vern. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I would say for me, within the logic of the character, of his choices, like, number one, you never really see Becket defy his principles. Like, at first he's committed to Henry, and the thing is, we see him as an enabler and he's complicit. But like, from the first liaison in the haystack, in the family's home, he's just the lookout. Like, it's not like he's partaking of the women. He's just the lookout, and he's the one that enables the whole situation. But it's like, you think that, like, they're a pair, like I guess the folks that Falstaff hung out with, but he's never partaking. And then when they take the girl from her home, like that little hovel that they dive into, you think, aha, this is where we're going to see him be a man, but he isn't. And then when they go back to the castle, he has a woman. She loves him. He really can't reciprocate that love because his duty is to his friend. And he knows that at any moment, his friend, the king, could take her, which he does. And he doesn't quibble about it. He's like, I made a bargain with this guy and I've got to stick with my bargain. And so,
Kind of an early Faustian bargain,
right.
in a way.
And I think, like, that's the thing that they're showing you all along, is at first they're very low stakes, but as he gets promoted, whatever his role is, he takes it very seriously. And so he keeps warning Henry, if you do this, I'm going to be consistent. And Henry's like, well, I'm the king, and so you're always going to have to defer to me. And then he gets to the point when he makes him the Archbishop of Canterbury, and he's like, now, like, the implication is my loyalties are divided. So as long as we're on the same path, everything is cool. But when you make a decision, then I'm going to have to choose between the chancellery and the Rome. And then he forces him, then the circumstances of, whatever Gilbert, like that forces his hand, So I think he's being extraordinarily pious, not to God, but to his oaths. Like when he makes an oath, and I guess that's what Thomas More commits to, an oath. So when Becket commits to an oath, he takes it very seriously. And I think he's very consistent with that. So at the beginning, he really doesn't have any kind of sacred oaths. But as he does this ascension, he takes all the oaths very seriously. And so I think in that way, Henry is devoted to himself and to being king and to his friend. But he also makes choices, and he chooses to forsake his friend. Like being a king and getting these ladies is more important to me than our friendship, because he's open.
Or is it a test of his friendship? Is he testing Becket on purpose?
I think
That's how I read the scene.
I think they're both tested, and that's the thing. Henry says, like when he makes that choice, when they're in the bed with I guess the Marie, he's like, I can't trust you anymore. It's like now you're making choices and
I'll
I can't.
never know what you're thinking.
Yes. Nevertheless, his love for him is transcendent, so he can't give him up. What show is that? I Can't Quit You. What movie is that from? I can't.
Brokeback Mountain.
He can't quit him. Oh yeah, Brokeback Mountain. He
Which
can't.
was which plays on this same theme, doesn't it?
Yeah, and one thing I was gonna say, like when you guys were talking,
What
is
movie?
Brokeback Mountain. But the other thing I was gonna say is Becket, the Becket Henry story. It plays out a lot like Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad from start to finish.
I was going to bring that up later, but I'm glad you did.
Exactly.
That this is something that repeats itself throughout history. This particular relationship where a person is promoted. And that was going to be one of the examples that I used. So I'm glad you brought that up. I'm sorry I interrupted and finish your point, but that's excellent.
No, that was it.
I would like to interject very shortly because there's something that hits me when you speak of this devotion to the oath, Vern. Because as I mentioned earlier in the room, when he says to Brother John, please leave, and he goes directly to speak with God, but John hears the beginning of the prayer and comes back and listens to the whole thing. And he says to him, he's repentant because he has been thinking of Becket in the worst way possible, and now he sees that he's really in contact with God. And Becket says, I did not know it either. So I don't see Becket as so devoted to the oath, number one. But number one for him is he has been centered in his core, and through this sequence of events, he has found himself as being 100% devoted, not to an oath, but to God. He just cannot do anything else but ask God, please tell me what to do next.
Well, and you see that throughout it, Silly. That your point is reinforced all the way through it. You see him at one point. He tells the bishop. He says, "I'm beginning to believe he's not such a bad God after all," and you see, and again when he's giving away all of his stuff to the poor, and how much he just absolutely loves it, and what this burden has been taken away from him because he's given all his troubles to God, you feel that this is a slow epiphany, and so it's not just one kind of muddled prayer scene. I've had an epiphany, and now I'm solidly pious, but and then I'm going to let Vern make his point. But the question that I'm going to go around with after this is. Henry does not come across as a very pious person. You look at the way that he gives the sign of the cross, like it's just cursory, giving it through when he accepts his penance. You can see he's just kind of, oh, you dogs, you Saxon dogs,
Dogs or pigs?
Well, he calls them dogs, then he calls them pigs later. But in both times he's referring to the clergy. He doesn't come across it as a pious person, and so Becket is somebody who's dedicated his whole existence to somebody who's not particularly pious, might have an adversarial view of God, whereas now he's been promoted to someplace where his basically, besides the Pope, his only other boss is God. He and he realizing that, I prefer this employer to my previous one. That's a slow realization throughout the film. It's not just one scene. But Vern, finish your point.
Yeah, and I have to run. I got dinner coming, but I was going to say at the beginning, his oath is to, I guess, God, king, and country, and the king he's very proximate to. So his loyalty, his oath is to Henry, and Henry is an instrument of God, by definition. But then once he's given the title of the Archbishop and he takes that oath seriously too, now there's a divergence in the track. Like before, it was like, it was two rails on the same track, and now one of the rails is diverging. And so that's the fork where he has to make a choice, because before God, king, and country, they're two rails on the same track. But now suddenly he's an archbishop, and he has to decide whether his alignment is going to be to a narcissistic um, cretin hedonist, or whether it's going to be to this other oath. Like before he had a single oath, but once he puts both those rings on, he's got two oaths that are diverging, and he's going to be a Vulcan. He's going to be Spock.
Yeah, so why don't you
That's
look
perfect.
at the pragmatist? Like maybe not the opportunities, like it's just like simple, like looking for good living and like raising himself and like pragmatism, and like doing that through honor. And like as Eric said, like doing through perfection in the job. What I don't see anything negative there. I don't know why.
I think it's only negative because Henry doesn't have a moral compass. Like he just wants to get the ladies, and he wants his money, and he wants to dominate, and it's all about him. And as long as he's in service to him, it's great. But then when Henry gives him that other ring, and it's supposed to be he's supposed to stay complicit, and he's supposed to stay deferential to Henry, but he's taken the oath differently. And then if your oath is to be kind of pious to the church, well, then there's contradictions. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying there are inherent contradictions, and he needed to make a choice.
And that's an important point. There was no such thing as a separation of church and state at the time. The church was part of the state.
I see all Henry's flaws as like so Freudian and like deprivation of mother, and I post like a few links there.
He even says something about not being breastfed. Yes. I saw that link.
Exactly.
I saw that. I saw that link. Yeah, I laughed out loud. I had to mute myself.
It's like so
Well, and yeah,
something
see, that
else
was a
about
point you wanted to make
aesthetics.
that we kind of ya'd over. That was a point you wanted to make, and this is a good point to make. It's the treatment of women in this film.
Yeah, because I wanted to compare it to the Thomas the Thomas More's household. So I leave it for next week to do the
That's good too.
comparison.
That's
But
good too.
what I wanted to say about the aesthetics, we forgot the most important sentence in the movie with the French girl in the bed when Henry points at her hips and says, "How about the static here?" Like the pure aesthetic. That was amazing. Like he said it out loud about the aesthetic. Yeah.
Well, and he brings God into it, and he even says, how much more beautiful. He's never seen a church as beautiful as that woman's ass, basically.
Nobody has.
That French girl.
Nobody has.
Nobody has.
It was an extraordinarily good ass. I will say I would definitely give it a 9 or a 10.
Perfect.
I will, but I'm sorry. It was no cathedral.
And another thing that I find interesting, at least in my perception, I recall Becket always being very firm, but never aggressive. And what I mean with that is, at no point do I see him judging Henry. In his mind, he might be, but at least in the film, in the dialogues, in the monologues, he never belittles Henry, even though, like Reeves and Wooster, in some point, Stephen Fry might have a look on his face as to say, well, here you go being stupid again. That does not happen. So there is a very, and that's why I keep saying, in my head, in my intellect, in my heart.
Almost saintly. Almost saintly.
Yes. I don't see a failing Becket at no point.
That raises an aesthetic question about the performances in this film, because you have two contrasts in style. You have Burton's soft, quiet domination through soft, quiet power, and you have I am positive that after filming this, Peter O'Toole didn't have to eat for 2 weeks because he was so full of scenery. Because he had, which again is perfect for a king that was known to have ripped up a mattress and stuffed the straw in his mouth while rolling on the floor because he got so angry. And I'm going to say this, history buff that I am, whenever I read anything about King Henry, I hear it in Peter O'Toole's voice. So whether he was like that or not, I don't know. But to me, he nailed it. There's something I recommend. What's his name? Cox. Brian Cox played King Henry in a BBC series called The Devil's Own. If you want a contrast where you have a different interpretation of Henry, it's a great performance. But O'Toole is just so huge. But the thing is, without having Burton's quiet, reserved power there,
correct,
then O'Toole's performance, it's like Abbott without Costello. It's like Laura without Hardy. It doesn't work. You have to have the straight man. And in all great comedy duos, to me, the straight man is the one who's doing all the work. He's the more important one, and that's the harder performance. It's very easy to be Jerry Lewis going, "Hello, lady," but if you've got a Dean Martin there to soak it up, But who do you think gave the better performance in the film? I think Burton actually gave, in a quiet, reserved way, the performance, the better performance, despite the fact that, like I said, I can't think of Henry II without thinking of Peter O'Toole.
I think both of them, that was the biggest Oscar mistake in the history of Oscars. That put both of them in the same category, like main actor, because they couldn't decide which one is better, and it caused both of them to lose. Or it would have been like Moriah Abraham and oh my God, how on earth Mozart, like the same thing that happened there. Like they both were so stunning. Tom, come on, help me here. Both of them, they were so amazing and powerful, and like this kind to deliver, and their performance every minute. I told you, their chemistry, their look, like the way that they look at each other tells, like, instead of like
well, I do want to point out Sidney
dialogue.
Poitier won that year for Lilies of the Field.
Oh,
But,
so okay, that's a competition there. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
The competition beyond the competition.
Exactly. But these two here in this film.
he was also nominated for Tom Jones. So I mean,
I told you, Eric, this morning I invited like some of my rainbow friends, and we were like having this thing, and then I played the movie for them, and I said, guys, please help me here. Is it like the homoeroticism? Is it subtext? Is it there, or I'm seeing it here? And they start watching.
Your gaydar was definitely strong on this one.
And then they got like at the beginning of the film, at the bath scene, when like Burton started like attending to him, and like and they said, look, we have subtext, but this is obvious text. You don't even have to look for subtext; it's text. And
that's why my favorite scene in the movie is that reunion scene on the beach where they're standing on the two horses, or where they're sitting on the horses, and because to me that felt like a scene of a Noel Coward couple, seeing each other after a long time or something like that, and when he says, "Don't start. If you start, we'll quarrel." I felt emotionally involved in their relationship. During, and that, and like I said, and the dialogue is just so expertly written.
But going back to the conversation we had about Almodovar, tie me up, tie me down, the moment that like he says, just again the companionship, when like he said, as like Sila said, they don't even need this like physical touch. It's just them to be there for each other mentally, like even sometimes the maturity of the character, the Becket character, is that he tends to him like a father. He says, the moment we hear blood, and how these stories, that the script, everything comes in circle. Nothing is there, like nothing is said for no reason. He says, you don't like blood, you don't need to see my wound. And then later on the like next scene, after the like when Eleanor kills herself, and Henry sees her like dead body, comes up to Becket, tells him that I saw blood, and I don't want to be alone tonight, and I just want to spend the night here, just like need you to be here for me mentally. This dynamic, and I think Becket till the end sees himself as a servant, but for Henry this is more like a friendship and big brother, fatherly, even like motherly kind of, to feel the voids, the emotional voids that he has. And, and that plays to the honor. Becket remained honorable to him because of this feeling. But, Henry has this kind of possessive jealousy and wants it all. So that's why he makes
felt like a wife. Becket almost felt like a wife to me.
Exactly.
Like a subservient housewife, but a wife. Yeah. Like almost like Eleanor's replacement, which in real life would have made sense, actually, because Eleanor was incredibly independent and spent most of her time in Aquitaine. And, basically, but she spent the first 9 years of their lives pregnant, which is just incredible. But she was a full decade older than Henry in real life. And so, and I don't want to go too much into the real history because I'm not making a comparison to the film saying, oh, well, and they didn't get that right. What I am saying is the real life relationship between Becket and Henry may have actually had some of that because Henry, because Henry did actually rely a lot on his male servants, especially his chancellors, and it was more than just going in and doing your job. You were with the king 24/7. He had what was called a groom of the stool, who I'm gonna let you imagine what his job was, but yeah, it's exactly what you think it is.
That was good. That was really, that's what Sila said at the beginning of the room, that how we can right now go back and revisit history and revisit all these connections and relationships and have new discoveries. And that's so beautiful. I think that's what movies bring to us, not just a simple read of history in a book. This is what all this visual representations and symbols and elements and colors and dialogues and I love it, at that the this inappropriate jokes in the moments of the movie, this that so ground everything actually. For me, when, for example, when Henry enters the room, that very romantic scene between Eleanor and Becket, they're holding hands and having this very, very romanticized, beautiful dialogue, and then he enters and he says, look at me, Becket, look at me, having my finest moment, and then he burps. I was what's happening here?
And that beautiful music that she's playing on the lute.
Music. Oh, what is the name of the instrument? What's the
which
instrument?
Was just that's a lute.
Yeah.
That's a lute.
Yes.
But it's a Welsh lute. The reason you can tell that it's a Welsh lute is because it has the large end, whereas the English lutes had a very, very small end where the strings were put to, which is very interesting because she, by being Welsh, is a conquered person, and she discusses having been conquered by Becket. And so she is to Becket what Becket is to Henry in a way, which is and Becket is, unlike Henry, incapable of loving her back. And that's the scene where Henry says to Becket, "I am your friend, and you're wrong not to love me," which is, I think, the great kind of summing up of the film in that.
It's a very, very unbalanced, at least from my perspective. If we go to the what you call codependent aspect, then no. But as an observer, and as the observer that I am, with my mentality, with my intellect, to me that is a very, very unbalanced relationship, because to some aspect, this is what Verne was referring to. Becket is through and through a servant. And that includes, of course, the oaths he has taken. And in my view, when I think of many historical points and interpretations in film and the arts, once a person, no, when a person is a really through and through servant, he or she has only two choices. One is to continue to be a servant, or to find a way out of servantry and become an oppressor. I don't think it is possible for a true servant to go out and be neutral. So either you
Well,
are
and
a servant.
that's shown up a lot in the fact that abused spouses often become abusers.
Yes,
In
yes,
and which is it's a horrifying statistic, and it's part of what being in an abusive relationship and being abused does to you, is because you don't know any other kind of relationship, and so you are either the abuser or the abused.
and this is why I've always said that money does not and cannot corrupt the character. If you're an asshole, you are simply keeping that low because you don't have the money to express it. And once you become rich, then you will express what you were to begin with. But it does not change you. And in this case, I find Becket was so immersed with his mindset, which I don't know why a person turns out that way. He was so immersed in his dedication to his lover, but at the same time saying, if he asks for you, which I didn't know he was going to come straight and ask for you, I must give you away. I have no choice in this matter. And he takes it further when it comes to God, and he has they have this dialogue when he says, well, Henry keeps talking about England and the crown, and Becket says, well, in England is more than just the crown. So he is above everything in terms of his dedication and his understanding to who he's supposed to be faithful to. And he doesn't, at the same time, he never, at least I didn't hear it, he never judges Henry for being shallow or for being whatever, but he has a certain control, which I don't think he expresses, as to what his love actually is. Is it just servantry, or is there really a connection, a soul, a spiritual connection to Henry at all? It does, to me, it doesn't seem to be there. It doesn't exist. He's just a servant. And when he is supposed to serve as a general or as an angel, then he's just a servant as an angel. But he never gets out of his conceptual attitude of being a servant.
And it's interesting to discuss, although this is outside the film, this is in real life. Becket dealt with Henry in very, very bad faith. That scene I keep harkening back to, which they reset on the beach, where the agreement that Becket made with Henry was that he would accept all but one of the articles of Clarendon, you know, and in exchange, Henry would forgive any of Becket's supporters back home. Then the moment, and this part is shown in the film, the moment he returns, Becket excommunicated all of Henry's supporters. And when he was asked, well, wait, Henry has forgiven all of his enemies and your friends, and Becket just simply said, in real life, that it's not the same thing. And so in real life, Becket did, as you pointed out, turn into the abuser. He abused his power once he had it to abuse. Now, in the film, we're not supposed to see that because we have to see Becket as the hero, because otherwise the film would be just a very tawdry mess if you didn't have anybody you were rooting for, you know?
You know, I think we can like look at it also, you know, the relationship of any king and commoner, or like, you know, or any like this kind of like class distinction and everything. But in the movie, like, it plays so, you know, like this distinction, we can like look, as I said, like we can look at it as a racial metaphor, or like subtext metaphor, or anything also. And I think even though it's played so black and white, still it has this subtext, and the, you know, the this question is still there, and we can like figure out completely what is this dynamic. And I think that's the another aspect that adds to the power of the screenplay. They don't like play their hand completely, you know, it leaves you this, they give us, as you said, respect us as the viewer, as you know, gives us the benefit of speculate and go and dig deeper and look deeper through these characters. So I have a question. Was that Edward and Hart, or Peter Glenwell, that was uh accused of collaborating with Germans during the World War? That kind of skipped my mind right now. Like, there was something there that I think that aspect of reality of the time played in the movie in this way, like kind of English, German, French occupation, you know, at that the historic moment back then. And that again, the that also plays well, like parallel to the honor aspect of like how like French people and the like the Vichy government and the English people, you know, with the Germans and all that. I think we can also like
The collaborators, isn't that the word you're looking for?
is it that's my question. And is it true, like,
Collaboration.
no, which one,
Becket
like,
was looked at as a collab. Becket
was
was
it
looked at as a collaborator in the film, not in real life, but in the film.
and it, like
Becket is looked at as a
it was,
collaborator by his fellow Saxons. He's
that's
collaborating with the
true.
enemy.
But also, like Glenwell, he was accused of collaborating with Germans during the World War II, right? Or who was it? Was it like
No, it was a no. It was a Jean Anoulih. But
oh,
that
Jean
was
Anoulih himself?
it
Oh,
was a ridiculous claim. Here's what. Okay, now Jean Cocteau
yeah,
was.
our Jean Cocteau, my love, Jean Cocteau. Okay,
Yes,
uh-huh.
he did collaborate. He did. I mean, he
He
praised
did.
Hitler's architects, and he did
That
collaborate.
was
But
Jean Cocteau,
it,
La Belle et la Bête, the Beauty and the Beast. The
that's the man. Yeah, the great
oh
poet. Yes. Oh
no,
yeah, he published articles praising Hitlery architecture. But he was branded as a homosexual.
Eric, you have
He would
this
have had a
power to
pink.
ban.
He would have had a pink triangle put on him, and he would have been thrown into a concentration camp. He had no choice. He had absolutely no choice because he was open homosexual in Nazi-occupied Germany. He had no choice. But neither here nor there. Yeah, that's a conversation we'll have to have on a different day. When we do French history or French cinema history, we'll definitely have that conversation. And in Noah's case, no, he was accused of broadcasting for the Vichy, for Vichy France. Okay, a couple of things. He was 19 years old at the time and was a prisoner who, because he had been giving support to the resistance. And yeah, he did appear on a radio broadcast, but there's no transcript there where he says a single positive word about either the Vichy regime or about um, definitely doesn't say anything positive about Hitler. He was talking about art, and he was talking about fine art, and he was talking about cups, and he was talking about glass cutting and things like that. But so out for blood were the resistance after World War II that was enough for people to attempt to turn on him. Which I wonder if that informed his portrait of Becket as being, eyed as a collaborator, because I'm sure he lost a lot of friends over that, despite the fact that he was actually, it was a ridiculous accusation to make.
Eric, you have this power to kill all my heroes. That, like you said, H.P. Lovecraft, he had a cat with that name. Now you're saying Cocteau was working for Nazis. Please
Oh, I'm
stop.
sorry. And
All
Roger
these
and Roger Waters is
writers that I
not the
loved and
nicest.
appreciate.
And Roger Waters not the nicest fellow in the world. And
Roger Waters,
Pete
same thing
Townsend.
about Young Curtis.
Pete Townsend likes to look at pictures of naked children, and I'll work on it. But you know what? Instead, why don't you ask your heroes to stop doing these things?
Maybe I have to revisit all my heroes and reconsider all my relationship with art and writers. Boy, no. Or maybe I have to stick to this art separated from the artist aspect.
Yeah, great art is created by horrible human beings all the fucking time. And it's something you're going to have to learn to live with, I can enjoy a Woody Allen movie. I think he's a horrible human being, and I would never let him through my children.
Horrible human being. I watched his latest film, Coup de Chance, when I was in Paris 2 weeks ago. It's brilliant.
He's a brilliant filmmaker, but I wouldn't let him near my children.
Don't do this. Come on. It is a meal. So that's the topic for another room before we change
that's
this.
That's American film history again, and we're on UK cinema history.
Let's do this. So for next week, I just wanted to say I'm gonna go over the similarity of Emile Zola and the Thomas More story.
Great comparison. And a great pairing film would be The Life of Emile Zola, because that's a courtroom drama, just the same way. The same way that this is a courtroom drama. Yeah.
Can we also consider The Life of Emile Zola for next week?
We'll discuss it, but I'm not putting two titles in the title anymore. From now on, we're going to talk about one film at a time, do it very, very well, and then move on. I love these double features, but 4.5 hours is a lot to ask out of people, and I have a feeling this room would be a little bit fuller if people weren't I don't really have 4.5 hours to spare.
And I think Sela will love Man for All Seasons. That's Sela's kind of movie.
Oh, and the music. Oh my God, George Delrue's score for that is he did the score for Jules and Jim. He did Shoot the Piano Player. He did Hiroshima Mon Amour. All the Godard. The score for that is just absolutely gorgeous. Anachronistic as hell. But all movie music is, because we don't have the ability to reproduce music from that time. So
it's such an amazing movie, and the layers of the characters and how they're the performance. I said one thing, and I'm gonna say it now, and I repeat it next week, that the movie is as big as Orson Welles' ego and size as he is Wolsey in the film. That's
Sela, I don't know what your schedule looks like. I know you work Saturdays, and that's actually one of the reasons we have the room on Sundays, is because I wanted to work around people who especially in the retail profession, have to work Saturdays. But we would love to have you here, and if you could spare an hour and 18 minutes basically 2 hours of your time to watch A Man for All Seasons in between, I would love to have your input.
Yeah, next Sunday I'll be working, but that doesn't take away from being able to discuss if I have the time. But I will watch the film.
You're gonna love that.
Excellent. Well, don't set it up too much, because then he might be disappointed if you make it too big. It's okay. I'll tell you, it's a controversial film now. It is a controversial film now. So we will have a lot to discuss, and I want to track down, if I could find somebody Catholic to be on that conversation, because it is one of those films that the Catholic Church has said is one of the important films to watch, which is interesting that it's based on a play, and the screenplay was written by a confirmed atheist who, in his opening to the written version of the play, says, "Hey, I'm sorry, I took Thomas More and I made him into an atheist existential anti-hero." And yet the Catholic Church saw the film that we're going to watch and discuss, and came up with the idea that this was the best depiction of their beloved saint, and we all, should watch it as good Catholics. So I hope I can find somebody who is Catholic in faith and get their point of view as well. But the question that I'm going to leave us with for next week as we're watching it is this. The title, A Man for All Seasons, comes from a quote from Robert Whittington. More is a man of an angel's wit and singular learning. I know not his fellow. For where is the man of gentleness, loneliness, and affability? And as time requireth, a man of marvelous mirth and pastimes, and sometimes sad gravity, a man for all seasons. Which is where Bolt got the title. However, the play, A Man for All Seasons, that this is based on, Moore makes it clear that the title is supposed to be ironic. And there is a character who is actually the Man for All Seasons in the play, who is cut from the film, and he's a narrator figure. He's a chorus. He's Matthew, his servant in the film that you'll see, is one of the roles that he plays, and he also plays Thomas More's jailer, and he actually plays his executioner at the end. Spoiler alert: Thomas More gets his head cut off, and survives the Reformation under Henry. The Henry's son Edward swerved to extreme, what was then called Protestantism, marries Catholicism, and then Elizabeth's formation of the Anglican Church. That to Robert Bolt was the Man for All Seasons, but he's cut out of the film. So the question I'm going to ask next week, and I want you to think about, is who is, of the characters left, the Man for All Seasons of the title? So that'll be how we open our discussion next week. So we yet again talked longer than the actual length of the film, which is a symbol of a good film.
To end this room, and is that so? We speak to this highest level of faith and humanity, and we said, like, what are we human, like, without honor? Like, we have honor, and honor is like to save our soul, but as we see here, and we're gonna see next week, honor is not gonna keep us alive. Honor is what we're gonna lose our heads over. So what is this, the martyr or the honor? Or is it like, should we be alive to have honor, to like have faith? Or no, is it like,
or are we honored to be dead?
Yeah, or like, death is the answer, what is honor is the answer. That's the existentialism and the nihilism in both movies. I think that's again, or
That is
and
a fascinating topic of conversation, and
thank you. Also, your
if you can find any friends who've read Kierkegaard, I'd love to get them in and pick their brain, because I have only read one book by Kierkegaard. It was called Sickness Unto Death, and there was not one joke in the entire book, so I never picked him back up again, which is ridiculous. The man invented absurdism, and he can't crack a joke, not a single one. But no, all joking aside, Moore is definitely a Kierkegaardian figure as far as I know him, but I would love to have a conversation about the Thomas More of this film as a Kierkegaardian Christian existentialist.
also Chomsky, Foucault, power, like the look at power as like a Machiavellian or Foucault point of view. Power also, and we can compare it to this movie, the power play. That's what I wanted to do if we were doing the comparison. Now that
Well,
we
that's
won't do it,
great.
all that will
We
go
will,
next.
but we have this conversation to draw on next week, so we can
Yeah,
have that conversation.
next
So
week is
I
all
guess
philosophy.
warning,
The
it'll
doing of
probably be
philosophy.
about 6 p.m. before we finish, because it sounds like the room next week's going to run a little long. So you've all been duly
We
warned.
love you so
All
much.
three of us.
Please join us. We love your so poetic, musical, aesthetic points of views. It's like such breath of fresh air. You bring the grace to the room. Thank you. We have to say it. So next week we're gonna ruin your beauty and aesthetics with philosophy, and yeah, that's gonna be
In
dark
that term,
and
I love to
scary.
suffer.
And I suffer to love. All right. Well, I'm going to end this room. Again, reminder, we don't know what time, but Yazzie and I are going to have a little bonus room on Halloween about English horror in general, and her reflections on Dead of Night in particular, because she had real life issues and missed that episode. So it'll be sometime Halloween night. I'm thinking 6 p.m. sounds like it'll work for me, but I'm going to work around Yazzy's schedule. So that'll be October 31st. I'll schedule it either tomorrow or Tuesday during the day, but do keep an eye out for it and pop in, because it's going to be kind of an open floor after we're done with Dead of Night. We're just going to kind of talk about the horror genre and things that go bump in the night. So anybody who can join us, please do. Otherwise, we're just doing it so that we can get Yazzy's reflections on the replay for Dead of Night.
And just wanted to talk about Edgar Allan Poe, maybe a little bit.
Because he's so English?
No, because he sounds so English. He's supposed to be English.
Oh, you know what? I will suspend the rules, because it is a bonus room. You know what? We can, as long as you don't bring up Friday the 13th or Freddy versus Jason.
No.
If it's horror
I
related,
just wanted to talk about
we can bring it up. We
can talk about
Argento. We can talk about Argento. We can talk about all sorts of things.
Thank you.
It's just going to be a general horror.
Stila can join us with the pajamas and some Bach.
Stila doesn't own any
Chopin
pajamas.
Music, scary music, creepy music, and or the Baroque music, something scary. We appreciate that also. Anything creepy.
You just said Dada.
Spooky.
You just said Dada. I think that would work very well if we play some Dada music.
That's all I had.
Anything Dada is spooky. I agree.
Okay, well, we'll definitely see you all next week, and like I said, hopefully we'll see you all on Halloween. I'll schedule that room as soon as Yazzie knows what her schedule looks like, because obviously we're holding it for her, so without her, there wouldn't be a room. So real good. Man for All Seasons next week. Thank you very much. And for all of you listening on replay, go ahead and check out our Facebook, the UK Cinema History there at Facebook. And if you have any questions, comments, or corrections, I'm ETROMMATER on the platform formerly known as Twitter, now known as X, and you can just back channel me there, or you can just use the back channel here on Clubhouse.
Thanks for making me watch Becket. I really enjoyed it.
You're welcome. And good night, everybody, and have a great one. Want to join the conversation? Every Thursday, we record on the Clubhouse app. Just follow the link in the episode description, and you can be a part of our panel.